The project I'm going to talk about is we generally refer to as the Ute Mountain Ute Paleo TEK project. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Stefan Tangen. I work as the Tribal Climate Resilience Liaison. I work directly for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance in coordination with the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. I'm funded through a Bureau of Indian Affairs grant. It's hosted by the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, which is an intertribal organization that does water technical advisory for the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association. I'm going to briefly go through a couple of different things related to this project, like the development of it, what our goals and objectives are in the project, where we're at in the process, and then we'll definitely have some time for questions at the very end. So the actual title of the project is called Exploring the Past to Plan for the Future, Integrating Indigenous Knowledge and Paleo Perspectives to Inform Climate Change Adaptation. And our team consists of climate change coordinator from Ute Mountain Ute in Margie Connolly, a consortium partner of the NCCASC and works directly for the climate science partners. So a researcher named Dr. Shelley Crosby and is our paleoecologist. Dr. Margaret, he's a red steer, as a researcher, as a lecturer at University of Washington, used to work for USGS, and a Crow tribal member, and spent a number of years living and researching in the desert Southwest. Dr. Brian Miller is our U.S. Geological Survey partner, works for the NCCASC, and is an expert at scenario planning, and then myself. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we are hoping to accomplish. We are in the middle of this project currently, and so some of this is slightly fuzzy, so bear with us and definitely ask clarification questions if something seems unclear. Our idea is to combine Western science, so looking at paleoecology, lake and bog cores, and utilizing scenario planning, combining that Western science with traditional ecological knowledge. And we're going to put that all together to inform climate adaptation planning, which could inform projects with Ute Mountain Ute's environmental department. They're the main beneficiary of this project, and our goal is to kind of directly serve their interests and goals and needs. So the first step is utilizing these paleo records. We've already begun doing that. Shelley's been able to develop a pretty strong set of data that looks at lake and bog cores. And this information helps look at past climatic changes and transitions in the region. Using that analysis and that data set, and then combining it with interviews with elders in Toyac on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation, as well as archival materials of land use, and then other sources of land change over history, combining all of that, putting it together, and that will drive a scenario planning workshop that will be held at the end of the project. And that will be with the environmental department at Ute Mountain Ute. That will provide opportunities for decision making, better understanding some of the data and how it can be used for making decisions about climate adaptation projects and moving forward with being proactive. So the context of this project was that I came on to do this work in 2018, and in 2019 visited Toyac, met with Margie. They had completed a vulnerability assessment and were near completion of their climate action plan. And then during that meeting, one of the issues that Margie brought up was finding a source of funding that would enable them to keep moving forward. As you can imagine, climate change work hasn't really been institutionalized for a lot of tribes. And so a lot of this is grant funded. And one of the concerns was finding a good source of funding that would also enable them to turn their plan into action and actually implement it. One of the opportunities that existed at the time was, and still exists annually, is the NCCASC call for research funding. And we use that to address capacity issues and create better information for the Ute Mountain Ute. So that was kind of our RFP that we went after. And we developed a team that had the skills and experience to accomplish the goals and objectives that Margie had talked about and that we had heard from her boss, Scott, at Ute Mountain Ute. And actually the beginning of the project, or the idea for the proposal, came about from Shelley, talking about the usefulness of paleoecology and maybe informing tribal resource managers' decisions. And then at an in-person conference pre-COVID, we were talking about how we might be able to bring this all together. And I had recently come back from Toyac and was able to share some of that feedback that I'd heard from Margie. And then Dr. Redsteer is pretty renowned in the field, and we invited her as well, just knowing that she would provide a lot of value to the project. So kind of where we're at in the process is that COVID happened. We were poised to start last summer, obviously pushed it back based on what COVID was doing for many tribal communities, and just having no reason to be on the ground anywhere, particularly not in the vicinity of elders. And so we've just been patient. And fortunately, USGS, the partners that we work with, are incredibly understanding, recognize that we need to do extensions. And so we have done a year extension so far, and we're just being patient. We've continued to meet as a team to kind of hone in on how we can be valuable. Our key goal in this project is, like I said earlier, is to be useful to the Ute Mountain Ute Environmental Department. The data we collect, the information, obviously we're interested in showing that there's a proof of concept in combining TEK and Western science. But at the end of the day, if the information is not useful to the environmental department to make decisions about how they can address climate change there, we haven't done our job. So that's really our main focus. We're going to be moving down there in the summer to do some interviews, to meet with the environmental department and really sit them down and say, like, what do you specifically want to see in this data? Do you want to fully understand the way water flows may change or vegetation may transition, and really kind of get them to think hard about that? And those things will drive our data collection and also the way that we present that data. If it's something where they want charts and graphs, we'll figure that out. If it's something where they want color-coded maps and looking at the way that over a certain time scale, the vegetation may change, and we'll do that. So we're really trying to make sure that everything that we collect and prioritize is coming from their interests and needs. And then I'll just mention a couple key points here about the way this project can be thought of. Building capacity, building adaptive capacity through the research project is absolutely part of the goal. So we certainly want to produce deliverables, outcomes that are useful, measurable, implementable, but actually also the process of working with Margie, working with the environmental department, interviewing elders, collecting this data, it is all part of the adaptive capacity process. And it'll be interesting to see after it's all done, what that looked like, how that may have affected their climate adaptation program, how it may have influenced them in being proactive in this process. And that's really a key here, and something that gets talked about a lot, but I don't think it can be overstated, is that if we're not being proactive, then we're being reactive. And so the key to being proactive is to moving things forward, keeping things going, keeping money, supporting people doing that work. Margie is grant funded, and so keeping her working on these things is pivotal for Ute Mountain Ute. And moving from planning to implementation is really key, and it's not easily done in a grant funded process. It is incredibly challenging. Also, like, climate adaptation planning is fairly new for most folks, and turning those plans and prioritizing what projects should go first, second, third is not easy, and it's an approach that is unique to each tribal nation and each group of people doing that work. So this would be really interesting to see if we can support that and move that forward. Fourth, there is maintaining momentum for Ute Mountain Ute to move forward with climate adaptation. Yeah, as I mentioned, just having Margie in her role and having climate change a priority for them. I mentioned also that the Utes have kind of we've copied what Mark and the Lower Missouri River tribes have done. That's important, having those workshops, bringing the Ute tribes together and keeping opportunities to discuss climate change as an available thing and to keep that on their radars is key to momentum building and keep it going forward. And then I mentioned before that the proof of concept idea, like, there are not a lot of TEK Western science projects out there that really show how those types of knowing speak to each other or not. And whether or not it works in this project or does not work, it would just be interesting to show the way we've gone about doing it. And whether or not we're successful, we don't know, but it'll be useful, I think, for other folks to see what we've done and maybe learn from it, maybe build upon it. If we fail, they can figure out how to make it succeed. So regardless, I think it will be useful for other folks to kind of see this body of work. Okay.